cities with the Answer Coalition. So that is a total of 26, and we've got one more city to go. We will have been to almost 30 cities across the United States. And the way this tour came about partially was, of course, we needed to raise money. But something is happening in our country, I feel it, because cities began to ask to be added to the tour. And with little notice, organizations, peace organizations came together in each city, and they were able to put together events just like this one. And we have had standing room only in every one of our events. And so if the people who are standing up would sit down, I know we would fill every chair here in Detroit. I would like to begin by acknowledging my aunt is here. And yeah, she just happened to be in Detroit. And so I want her to stand up. My Auntie Joanne. She came all the way up to Detroit chasing after me because she wanted, I've gone into the lotion business. I make my own lotion because one, I don't trust what they put in the corporate lotions, and I have a shea butter that is to live for. Shea butter, virgin olive oil, and vitamin E oil all mixed together, and it makes a wonderful lather for your skin. That's why she's in Detroit. She came all the way up to Detroit to get it. And I want to commend the young people who made their artistic contribution to our event today. They sang Good Morning America. And we need to send that message throughout our country, and I believe this almost 30-city tour is sending a message. Good morning, America. We, the people, are going to make a new and better America. They sang, we're here to kickstart the revolution. Well, just before I came over here, I decided to listen to a video of a real president who was trying his best to kickstart the revolution. It was President John Kennedy giving his speech at American University when he asked the question, what kind of peace do we want? And he answered his own question by saying, not a Pax Americana enforced on the world by U.S. weapons of war. He said, we want a real peace, a deep and long-lasting peace, the kind of peace that's worth living for, a peace for every young person on this planet, a peace for every man and woman. That is why we have come here today, because everyone in this room, we are not confused. We are against war. Right? We are not only against U.S. wars in general, we are against every U.S. war that is being waged now, and we are also against the U.S. war, U.S. NATO war in Libya. And our entertainers also had something else that's very relevant. They said, today, if I understood them correctly, today I'm a better me. And what we are trying to create is a better United States. We know that our country can be better than what it is today. We know that our government does not represent our values. Our warmongering government does not represent the peace-loving people of the United States. And so, not only do we want to make a better me, we want to make a better community, a better country, a better world. That's why we are here. Now, I wanted to show this film that I literally just got, but it hasn't finished buffering, and my technical assistant seems to have left. So I'm on my own here. So what I will do is I will hope that it will quickly finish buffering, and in the meantime, I will say a bit of news that I just received today in addition to this video. But I also received a phone call from a friend and supporter, a fellow peace lover like us, who lives in Canada. And he literally started crying on the telephone. He was crying because, yeah. Yeah. He was crying because his best friend is being held in a hotel that is controlled by the rebels. The NATO allies, I call them, to make it very clear that these are people from Libya, but they're not all from Libya, and they're not only from Libya. They are from other countries in the region. And these people are NATO's allies. And the gentleman's best friend committed the crime of being an alternative journalist who went to Libya to tell us the truth. And now he is in a hotel where last night they exchanged gunfire inside the lobby of the hotel. And this young man has been targeted along with 3 other individuals who are there because they also went to tell the truth. And one individual who is a representative of the mainstream corporate media in the United States turned or tried to turn this alternative journalist over to the rebels. So that now this young man, he's 29 years old, his life is in danger. And even as his life is in danger because he did what I did, what we all want people to be willing to do, but he's almost close to paying the price because he's there now at this time. He is also trying to protect the life of a former member of Congress who is with him. That is Walter Fauntroy. Walter Fauntroy is holed up in a hotel in Tripoli, hiding from the rebels, and the rebels control the hotel. This young man from Canada and Walter Fauntroy and the young woman from Britain, some additional American citizens, are all there. They were there. Some of them I met, some of them I did not meet. But they were all there with the same goal and purpose, and that is to report to the world the truth. And agents of the United States government inside the corporate media have turned these people into enemies. And they are in the middle of a war zone. I won't, because they told me, they asked me not to name the media outlet, but right, that's the media outlet they asked me not to name. But what has brought us to this point in Tripoli is the fact that embedded in the media under the guise of journalism were members of intelligence agencies from the various NATO countries who were transmitting information for targeting purposes to NATO. Just this last week, that the fighting has been contained inside of Tripoli, 3,000 people are dead. That is the message that I just received and that I was asked to transmit to you. So, yes, this is just about done. And so I want to show you this so you can get a feel for what is happening literally right now. I just got this today.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no sound. So then there's no sound. Where's our technical guy? receive this today? Now, the question I have for you is this. Can you imagine this happening in Detroit, Michigan? What you just witnessed.
You're from out of town, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. What you just witnessed was sent to me from a Libyan national whose skin is dark just like mine, who is a businessman here in the United States. He joined us in Houston, Texas, when our Truth Tour took us there to that city. And at that time, he was just doing his business because it was very early in the tour. And he made a statement at that event that if need be, the people of Libya would fight house by house, block by block, inch by inch, bullet by bullet, body by body. And that they were willing to fight to the last person, because women fire those rifles too, in order to protect their country, in order to save their sovereignty, their right of self-determination. That young man is now one of those volunteers who has left this country and who has gone back. That was what he just sent to me today. Volunteers, people who feel so deeply about their country that they're willing to leave the comfort of this country and go back and defend the integrity, the sovereignty of Libya. That is now, I want to tell you a little bit without going too long because I want to make sure we have time for question and answer. But I want to tell you a little bit about what it was that made me go to Libya. Why in the world, when the bombs are falling, would anybody decide to go there? Well, I decided to go there because I kind of have a little bit of understanding not only of our current events, but also of our history. I know that since we are also in Black August, let me just say that I know that through the counterintelligence program, that my government has not exactly told me the truth.
No.
And I also know from the transcript, from reading the transcript of the 1999 trial of trying to assess who was complicit in the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that not only does our government not tell us the truth, but they have hirelings inside the highest media outlets, the ones that we look up to, and they also will not tell us the truth. So we can't count on our government to tell us the truth, and now increasingly we can't even count on the ethics of journalists to tell us the truth either. And so I understood all of that, and then there was another part of my understanding that contributed to my understanding, and that is this. In January and February of this year, I was invited to Libya. And I was invited to invite a delegation of people to go to Libya. It wasn't the first time that I had been invited to invite a delegation of people to go to Libya, because something happened with me in December of 2008, and that put me on the radar screen of people in Tripoli. And that something was that I received a phone call from the Free Gaza movement asking me if I were willing, in the onset of Operation Cast Lead, which was the military attack on the people of Gaza by Israel, the world's fourth most powerful military, if I would go on a boat and deliver medical supplies to the people of Gaza. And without hesitation, in 5 minutes, I said, yes, absolutely, of course. Well, you all know the story, because in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, on our way to Gaza, the Israeli military not only surrounded our boat, but they rammed our boat. And that's when I realized that I didn't know how to swim. And I started to figure out why in the world did I agree to do this. And I still don't know how to swim. So, it made the news, and then of course it made even more news when a few months later I decided to accept the Free Gaza call again and get on a boat and try and make it to Gaza. This time I had school supplies, because we had been told that the children of Gaza needed crayons, coloring books, watercolors, and that sort of thing. And so I had gone around and collected a whole suitcase full of that, and everybody on the boat had, there were 21 of us, and we had school supplies for the children of Gaza. Well, the world's fourth most powerful military was threatened by the prospect of the children of Gaza being able to color. And so they surrounded us again, and this time they kidnapped us, and I spent 7 days in an Israeli prison. Of course, not without one peep from anybody in the United States Congress or from the White House. And this is all the while we had Irish nationals, and we had UK nationals, and their leaders were calling for their release, but there was stone stark silence from the United States of America for the Americans that were on that boat. Well, the people somebody in Tripoli was paying attention, and so in 2009, they invited me on my first delegation, to take a delegation to there to learn about the Green Book, which is the underlying philosophy that guides the formulation and the formation of the Libyan Arab Socialist Jamahiriya government.
Go ahead.
And what I learned was that Senator Mike Gravel who is very active on issues of direct democracy, had also been there and endorsed the concepts that are contained in the Green Book and the Organization of Revolutionary Committees, which was the organization by which there's direct democracy. Every Libyan national has a say in the decisions that are made by their government. And then in January and February of this year, I was there again, invited to participate in a conference that was called for people of African descent. Because in Europe, there was a big issue. The issue was the treatment of Africans who had migrated to Europe, and they were being mistreated. There were people who came with their stories of being harassed, being threatened, being intimidated. One young man got up and told the whole story, showed a lot of photographs of people who were beaten up, and the last photograph he showed was of himself. He also was a victim, targeted because of the color of his skin, targeted to be beaten up on the streets of Europe. In fact, he just happens to be in the Czech Republic, I believe. And he was beaten up. And so the idea that was put forward at the conference was that people of African descent have a right to be able to live on this planet in dignity.
Yeah, right.
And if you cannot live in dignity where you are, whether it's the Western Hemisphere or it's Europe, no matter where you are, if you can't live in dignity, then come back home to Africa. That was the message of that conference. Come back home to Africa. Come back home to Libya. The sanctions had been lifted from Libya, and Libya was in a frenzy, a building frenzy. And you could see it all over, that they were building, just like these high-rise buildings here, building high-rises all over the country. Because in Libya, in the socialist Jamahiriya, housing is a human right. And therefore, the government provides housing for everybody. Now, we have been joined on this trip by other Libyan nationals. And in Massachusetts, he actually was in Massachusetts, New York. He's been with us on several of the cities of the tour, but he's a student at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And he told us that he receives 2,500 dinars a month. And that's a part of his oil revenue sharing. But he's also a student. And so he goes to University of Massachusetts, and the government pays for his education. The government pays for his living expenses. The government pays for his family. And so education under the socialist Jamahiriya is a human right. And whatever your talents are, you can be at the Al Fatah University, which I visited after they had gotten bombed. Or, if your talents will allow you to get accepted at the University of Massachusetts, then you can go there and the government will pay. Also, healthcare is a human right. And if a Libyan national has an ailment and there's a problem with treatment in Libya, then the government will fly that person and family member to whatever country it is that has the expertise that is needed, because healthcare in the Libyan Arab Socialist Jamahiriya is a human right and is provided by the government. Now, that is particularly interesting to me as I struggle to prevent my son from taking out too many student loans. And since I'm in a PhD program, I struggle myself not to have too many student loans, but since I don't have very much money, I have to get a student loan. I don't have the ability to pay the more than $20,000 every year, which is cheap. Which is cheap by US standards. It's cheap. So there is another vision for running a country. And we need to be able to learn that there are these other visions. It's not just the Libyan Arab socialist Jamahiriya that treats the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or at least these aspects of it. And I don't want to glorify, because I understand that there is dissent, there is opposition, there is things that we would not necessarily agree with, but there are things that we do agree with. We hear from CNN and Fox the things that we don't agree with, but it's very rare that we hear the things that we do agree with. And this Libyan national was available on the tour, made himself available on the tour to let us know that. And then the last little bit of information that he left with us at the last stop, which I believe was Boston, was that the electricity is also free of charge. So now, can you imagine not having a utility bill? So anyway, I decided that I would take a delegation of journalists to go and see what actually was happening in Libya, because remember, this was supposed to have started in February. Well, we were there in February. And Al Jazeera had run a story that was repeated by Haaretz, that the Libyan government had turned helicopter gunships on the people and fired on them in Tripoli. And the people who were in the delegation, the African Diaspora Conference, just couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe it. But steeped in the knowledge that sometimes governments will lie, sometimes even our own government will lie. No. And sometimes the media will lie, sometimes even our own media will lie. I decided that I would put together a delegation of alternative journalists. And what they were charged to do was to do what journalists do. Just go there, hit the ground running, interview people, videotape, do write stories, and tell the truth. That's all. Just tell the truth. And Wayne Madsen was one of those alternative journalists who was a part of the Dignity delegation. And Wayne ended up writing many stories. You can see the stories that he wrote on WayneMadsenReport.com. Jocelyn Lawrence with DC TV in the District of Columbia was there, and she did the videography. So most of what you have seen, or what you did see early on, coming out of Libya was actually the video that was shot by Jocelyn. And there was a journalist from South Africa who also was a part of the delegation. And that satellite that you've read about, probably you've read about, that the Libyan government provided for all of the African states. Well, he uses that. He owns a news channel in southern that beams the message, the news out to all of Southern Africa. And so he was a part of that as well. Channel 4 News, located in Cape Town, South Africa. Now, that's kind of why I went. What did I see? What I saw was not like this, because they weren't doing street fighting at the time. But I can tell you that I was a witness, I was an eyewitness to NATO's war crimes. Yes. NATO and the United States are committing war crimes in Libya. Yes, they are. They are targeting the civilian population. And the civilian population at the time that I was there was being denied food imports, fuel imports, and medicine. Even as the bombs were falling, NATO had a blockade and they were denying food, fuel, and medicine, if you can imagine. Targeting civilian population is a war crime. They also targeted Muammar Gaddafi for assassination. Now, targeted assassination is illegal under any aspect of international or U.S. law. Admiral Locklear admitted that one of the NATO missions was to murder Muammar Gaddafi. So we have the admission, targeted assassination is a war crime. What I also saw there was a spirit of resistance, like probably, I don't know if the people of the United States would be able to have a similar level of resistance. Because after all, we've had 2 presidential elections stolen and there wasn't any resistance. People in Mexico City shut down Mexico City for 6 months when they had their elections stolen. But we had 2 elections stolen here, presidential elections stolen, and we just accepted the outcome. But this spirit of resistance, Bab al-Aziza is the residential compound, which is no longer the residential compound of Muammar Gaddafi and his family, but it's bombed every night. And when I was there, people would go there at nighttime and they would have a party. They would have the drums and the singers and the dancers, and I had even thought about doing a peace concert at Bab al-Aziza. They camped out there, and increasingly as people's homes were bombed by NATO and they became homeless, it became a tent city inside. So every night when NATO bombed, they knew that they were bombing unarmed civilians. But they bombed Bab al-Aziza anyway. Every night. And just this past week, I have been told that Bab al-Aziza is now rubble. And not only is it rubble, but the migrant workers who refuse to go back to their home countries because they also experienced this sense of responsibility and comradeship to stay because they had been given the opportunity with the open door, open border policy that had been provided by the Libyan people for all Africans to come. There were Africans studying there free of charge, African shop owners there, Africans who had moved, left their homes, their countries, and gone into Libya and owned stores or were doing the business of what they were doing to live and be able to send remittances back home to support their families back home. Those Africans decided that they would stay. I met one African from Cameroon, one non-Libyan African from Cameroon, who decided that he would stay because he is a dedicated Pan-Africanist. and he said that Libya had been good to Africa, and therefore he was going to stay and do as much as he could. He called one of the members of the delegation approximately 3 days ago, literally in tears. He said, "My skin is black, my children are black, my wife is black, they are going to kill us." Because what has been unleashed in Libya now is something that I have called the Willie Hortonization of Libyan politics, where people are targeted and threatened and intimidated and killed and lynched because of the color of their skin. Can you imagine ethnic cleansing of people of dark skin in Africa? Now the problem with that is that according to the gentleman, the young man who sent me that video, approximately 58% of the people of Libya look like me. And so what does that mean? What does it mean when the Voice of America writes a story and says, "New Libya, more Arab, less African"? What does that mean?
That's the U.S.
I visited the home and family of one of those dark-skinned Libyans who was killed by the NATO allies. And you probably saw, if you saw the body hanging from the building, did you see that photograph? That is the family that I went to visit. And they were called on their loved one's cell phone and told, "We have your loved one. And watch what we do to him on Al Jazeera." And the family witnessed the torture and the murder of their loved one. I also tasted the grit of the bunker buster bombs, because I was there when NATO bombed only at night 26 to 29 times. But I was also there when NATO bombed during the day, in the morning, the afternoon, the evening, and night. 89 times one day we counted it. I was there and I was wondering, what was that in the sky? Because the clouds were not white and the sky was not blue. It was an off black color because there had been so many bombs dropped that the sky, the dust particles literally were hanging suspended in the